Marvel Studios' Loki Season 2 is being praised by critics as a masterclass in imaginative storytelling. It is ambitious and spectacularly cinematic. Empire gives Loki Season 2 4 stars. It is back and better than ever. Loki Season 2 for your consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. TV Academy members can watch the series on DisneyStudiosAwards.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Prestige Junkie Podcast. I am Katey Rich. I'm the awards editor here at The Ankler. And today, my co-host is The Ankler himself, I think is the official title. The founder of The Ankler, Richard Rushfield. Hi, Richard.
Good morning. How are you doing, Katey?
How have you enjoyed being called The Ankler or explaining to people what the verb to ankle means, which I've done a lot of since I started here?
Yes. So it was popularized in our world through Variety speak, which Variety no longer uses. But actually predates Variety. It goes all the way back to the theater and vaudeville. It's a term they used when someone left a job and it wasn't clear whether they were fired or had quit.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, we need a word for that, and I'm glad that I'm glad that we're keeping it alive.
Exactly.
So later in this episode, you'll hear my conversation with Jessica Gunning, who has had this just incredible spring thanks to her performance as the stalker Martha on Netflix's huge hit, Baby Reindeer. Richard, I know you watched, so we can talk about it a little bit later. But before we get to that, Richard, I brought you here so we can take a little bit of a broader look at Emmy season and then also TV as a whole. Emmy voting begins this Thursday. Hopefully some of our listeners are getting their ballots ready, trying to think of the best of what's going on in television. And ever since you wrote this newsletter called Causes for Hope, Causes for Despair, I've been thinking about it a lot because it feels like an echo of the internal argument that I've been having. I think a lot of people are having. Is Hollywood doomed? Is everything going to be okay? Is it a little bit of both? Is that the debate you're having with yourself, and that's why you would write such a thing?
Yeah, and it's the debate I'm having with a lot of people that work here in Hollywood that I talk to and want to know constantly, are we doomed, is the big question that I keep talking about. And I guess it's a question of how you define we. If we is the viewers, I don't think you're necessarily doomed. If we is the people who work in Hollywood and want to maintain the same life as they've had for a long time and keep working in it, it's a lot trickier.
Yeah. I mean, I think every conversation, you have off the record conversations, I have on the record, and they all kind of get to this point of like, well, nobody knows what's going to happen next. It's a weird time, which maybe makes it a weird time to be handing out gold statues. But I did want to kind of get the optimist side of you to start with. Again, as we get the chance with the Emmys to really look at what is going well in television. You've been writing about the box office at the movies a lot, which is a real sky is falling situation. But let's talk about TV for a while, where things seem to be a little bit more stable. What's giving you hope in terms of what's working well in TV?
Well, what gives me hope is that a lot of people are watching it, and there's a lot of things that a lot of people are watching. And there's a lot of Hollywood productions that are being more viewed in more ways, and to a scary degree. People are watching Hollywood productions everywhere they go while they're driving cars and sitting in restaurants on their phones. So it's, I think it is more valuable. The fight with between traditional Hollywood and Netflix and the streamers is kind of just a fight about delivery systems. But what those companies are making, it's pretty traditional TV shows and movies. It's things you would recognize as traditional scripted entertainment and unscripted entertainment by and large.
I mean, it does feel like the streaming wars, and we can talk about the downsides of that later, I think, but they have created this arms race of everyone trying to catch up with Netflix by making more stuff, and in a lot of cases, better stuff, not always better. I think Netflix's output can vary, as can everyone else's, but you know, when you get something like Showtime and Paramount Plus putting The Curse on, which is like never going to be a ratings juggernaut, but is interesting and something people talk about, Like that sense of competition still feels like it's creating really good stuff to me.
Yeah, I mean, it better be. It, when you're making 600 shows a year, there hopefully a few of them are more than okay. And on the flip side, when you're making 600 shows a year, it's hard to make all of them okay. So
sure.
There'll be plenty of stuff that isn't great, but that's the law of averages with production.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's giving me the most hope from this spring season from these Emmy shows we're looking at is the success of Shogun, which was this incredibly expensive effort from FX. And Elaine Lowe, our colleague, and I talked last week about how, it was greenlit in 2019 or something. It really is just like this echo from another era. But it comes out and succeeds at this point where, maybe Rings of Power and the Game of Thrones prequel House of the Dragon both kind of felt a little bit flat. It's like, oh, they can still make a big, lavish period thing with swords and stuff, and people want to watch that. Am I being blindly optimistic thinking that maybe people or networks or streamers will still spend money on things like that because of the success of Shogun?
I mean, I think the swords is the critical thing there. So if it looks more like Game of Thrones than Succession, I think you have there's a better chance of it. But it's still, those are really big bets. And I think there will be fewer of them. And if you're going to have a bet like that, I don't think it can be, we're going to spend a fortune per episode and everyone who works at blogs in New York are going to love it. It's got to, you have to be shooting for a broader audience than that.
So what from this spring crop of shows gives you any hope that something interesting is emerging or could continue to emerge in this kind of risk-averse period of Hollywood?
I think that HBO amazingly continues to update itself and to find great things. I think FX, as you say, like their quality has just remained at this remarkable level for so many years, and they have probably the best batting average of any network on. And you look at Netflix, they just continue to take chances and do different things. And you may not love all of it with all they produce. You certainly wouldn't, but they continue to be willing to take risks in ways that other networks wouldn't.
You're talking about all these people taking risks. Do you think the risk aversion of current execs is maybe being overblown? Are there still risks being taken out there?
No, I don't think it's being overblown. I think everybody's scared. I think everybody's really scared to fail. And it's doubly scary because they don't even know what failure means. So, because we don't have clear markers of success and failure. So it's not just that they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to do anything that could be perceived by anybody as failure. And I think, just talking about Netflix again, you look at the Comedy Festival, the John Mulaney talk show, they did hundreds of events, live events with that. I mean, it's just taking big swings and doing big, wild things and trusting that will work out. You've got so much of the P&L mindset on everything that there's just fewer places and fewer opportunities to do that. HBO has maintained a great culture, and so has FX of cultivating great shows, but they are in companies that are increasingly concerned with every single penny they can find. So it's how long can they hold all that at the door? Yeah.
I feel like before we were writing every week about how the box office was collapsing, which is a real urgent concern. There was a lot of writing every week about how there are no movie stars anymore. I think kind of in the immediately pre-pandemic era, we really wondered if movie stars were gone forever. And I think the trend we've been seeing in the last few years is really big, genuine stars emerging from television. Not all of them on Euphoria, many of them on Euphoria. But to me,
mostly from Euphoria.
But to me, that's another cause for hope in TV, that the system is maybe getting back to working the way that it's supposed to, that stars are coming from TV and big stars are still coming to TV. You've got, I think I did the math that there's 6 Best Actress Oscar winners in the limited series or movie Best Actress race this year. So that cycle is continuing. People are kind of emerging as powerful forces in television, maybe more than they've been able to in film for a long time. Is that another reason to have hope that the system's working?
Yeah, I mean, I think the need for stars is sort of a basic fundamental thing. It's like, you know, you go to a party and someone is the most glamorous person at that whatever party. If it's the community college math club, someone is the most glamorous, and that person is the object of attention. And I think putting people in that sort of pedestal and limelight, which sort of magnifies them, is a basic need. And I think we've had a problem in. To create stars, you have to match the right people with the right projects, and we've had a problem in sort of building the machinery that builds stars that way and makes them bigger and bigger, and keep going. But I think we keep finding them.
I feel like you and I have both had the experience of being in a room where a famous person enters, and the entire energy of the room, the noise, the temperature, it all shifts around that one person.
Yes.
It's never me. I don't know if it's ever you, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah, and the thing that's always interesting is when you're in a room full of famous people and the famous person who stops traffic for them. Mm-hmm. It's never like the biggest movie star. It's always someone who, like a politician or, I remember long ago being at Sundance. I was in a room where there were lots of A-list stars, and Paris Hilton walked in at the height of her moment and just took all the oxygen out of the room from these giant stars.
I will brag that I think my version of that story is better, which is at the Vanity Fair Oscar party a couple years ago. Joni Mitchell was there, and I watched multiple sets of famous people just stop dead in their tracks to not even talk to her, just kind of witness the fact that Joni Mitchell was present. So you're right. Better. It's not always who you expect.
That is better than Paris Hilton, yes.
It's one of my better ones, I'd say. Okay, let's get into the causes for despair. I don't know if you are as feel like you have to ring the alarm bell as much for television as for film, which is in a weirder place. But what worries you about not just TV in general, but kind of these prestige Emmy types of television that we're talking about here?
In the larger sense, I'm worried about just sort of the attention span and people's ability to stay with the show, to follow something that I think the big grand fight here. I have a friend who's an environmentalist who believes that the whole world is a fight between blue algae and green algae, and humans are just sort of a pawn in that game.
Wow.
And the big multi-million year battle of Earth is between those two kinds of algae.
Wow. I kind of like thinking about it that way. Exactly. We're not so important after all. It's the algae.
And I think in entertainment, it's a question of the grand battle is like, can people keep watching full shows? Can people keep watching things that are longer than 90 seconds or 30 seconds? The thing that worries me is how many of these shows come and they a lot of attention, a lot of steam. People are really, the first season really takes off and excited. And then the second season, people are eager to see it come back. And by the third season, no one even notices it's premiered. And I feel like that's the pattern of so many of our shows right now. It's just like, it's all just about this quick endorphin rush of finding the new thing, and then no ability to stay with it. And that was what was great about this era of television, that people could stay with these stories that developed over many seasons. And I worry if we're losing that.
Do you wonder if maybe we're just not built for that, and like the way that TV had it in the beginning where, if you miss an episode of The Brady Bunch, you're not going to miss anything, that's kind of reverting back to the normal of how our brains work?
That's a good point. It could be. But, you look at the way the Game of Thrones built over the years and those shows. I mean, it's basically a soap opera, but it was soap opera that managed to gather people up and build towards something, but there is something like, give me 20 minutes of people who are familiar to me and a couple laughs, and that's all I want. And then I'll go watch someone skateboard off a cliff or something.
You crunched the numbers a couple weeks ago about kind of the shows that people are actually watching versus the ones that we see people write about, but by me or on Vulture or anywhere else, and what a huge disparity there is. And it's obviously reflected at the Emmys too. The Emmys has gotten more niche as TV has gotten more niche. We're far away from like Friends being the #1 show in America and the big Emmy winner. Is that something the Emmys can or should fix at this point? Like, does the award season machinery kind of owe something to these shows that people are actually watching and sticking with for 8, 12, however long Blue Bloods has been on the air? These things, they last.
This problem goes back to back in the days with it was the Mad Men problem originally, where every publication named after media's favorite city put John Hamm on. I think the New York Times Magazine just said, okay, we're going to only have John Hamm covers for the next 10 years. Like he'll just be on every cover. And it had a modest audience throughout its run, whereas, say, Mark Harmon at the time was the highest paid star on television. And what was he on, NCIS?
Sounds right? Sure. I'm part of the problem.
I say, yeah, exactly. I don't think there was a single article or conversation with him in any one of those publications any of that time, which is not just to say that they should follow whatever's the biggest in the crowd, but if it's a complete rupture between what the media people are watching and what the large audience is watching, that's not a healthy thing.
Sure.
To just be in completely separate bubbles. And if the Emmys and the awards branches as well as media can't find some way to heal that and to be doing things that cross the bridge, the news I've got for them is that guess who's going to win that fight in the long run? The shows that have 20 million viewers or the shows that have 300,000 viewers?
Sure. You alluded at the beginning of our conversation to this idea that there's going to be less television, that the streaming wars are kind of cooling. There's not just this unlimited money. You can't just throw whatever you want on the air. And I think there's this awkward tension between what is maybe best for viewers, where it's not like every week there's some new show starring someone you like but you've never heard of because it's on a network that you don't have or anything like that. Maybe no one has time to watch all that stuff. And this idea that people are going to be out of jobs. There's just not going to be as many TV jobs as there used to be. How are we going to settle that? Like, where does that end? Can we ever kind of reconcile those two things?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. This what Hollywood brings to the table is like it's this enormous creative endeavor. You have an entire city filled with trained craftsmen, which people who do lighting, or people who can write an episode, and people who can do the contracts about it, and all this stuff to produce things at a really high level, and that requires having this kind of whole camp of people that just sit here and are available and who keep their skills at that very high level. The problem is we have a different kind of season and viewing it. We're not doing these shows that run 9 years and have 25 episode seasons. We're doing shows that run 2 or 3 years with 6 episode seasons are replacing them. And it's really hard for people to support the lifestyle to which they become accustomed at that level. So how do we support this whole infrastructure of talented people? And that is why Hollywood productions are still dominate the globe, because we have this level of craftsmanship and expertise, but it requires a big sort of collective investment.
Yeah, but we didn't have that 20 years ago. So if it gets back to what Hollywood was 20 years ago, is that enough?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to go back to 20 years ago, but I just think it's changed the whole. This is the problem with the attention spans. I just think there's nothing that is going to come and create those long seasons and long lasting shows. That everything is going to be just much more fleeting, which from an audience perspective is fine. It's not necessarily bad that people are watching shorter runs of shorter seasons. It's but great argument to be made that not all these shows had to be 25 seasons, but if you're making your living off it, it's really hard.
Yeah. I want to encourage listeners to either to kind of give their perspective on this. I feel like this is something that we're going to keep talking about in both the Emmy space and that you talk about in your newsletter often. So I won't tell them to spam your inbox, but for anyone who wants to argue back at Richard or argue for him or anything else, Katey@theankler.com. Email me. Next week, on next week's episode, I'm going to have my friend David Sims on, who I told you Richard is kind of much more of an optimist about box office specifically. So, if we get to a point where the listeners can be moderating a debate between you guys across podcasts, I feel like it will only benefit the Prestige Junkie enterprise. So please email me.
Come at me.
That's what you're here for. Before we wrap this up, can you just name a show, I guess, in the Emmy race in particular, that you are rooting for that either gives you hope or that just is something that you want to see succeed for your own enjoyment or for the health of the industry?
Maybe my favorite show of this era, just personal favorite, has been For All Mankind.
Oh, yeah.
Which has gotten has it ever gotten any Emmy for anything?
I don't think so.
I would love to see it get some attention for something, but
I think you are in good company there.
But I hope in vain also. But I hope in vain there, probably.
It has won for its interactive programming. It won an Emmy, a Creative Arts Emmy for Outstanding Innovation in Interactive Programming. And then again this year for Emerging Media Program. I don't even know what that is.
Great. The Emerging Media category.
Emerging Media is what we're all trying to hold on to, right? To keep our jobs going.
I was very happy that What We Do in Shadows was nominated for comedy last year. I would love to see it go all the way this time and take the prize. The funniest show on TV. So
yeah. No, those are two good ones that, again, maybe the peak TV problem that we have is that there's too many good things for the Emmys to get a hold of, which, gives us something to yell about every year. But maybe there's other people who are deserving who are left out too. And
love to see Traitors make a run at the reality category.
By the time this episode comes out, I will have gone to a Traitors FYC event in Los Angeles. That Richard, do you want to come with me to the Grove and ride the Traitors trolley? That's my plan.
Really? Wow! Right, is someone going to be murdered in the course of the trolley ride?
There's only one way to find out.
We might be gone.
Yeah. We'll talk off mic about what that can be.
I'm getting my kilt ready.
Well, Richard Rushfield, thank you for joining me. People hopefully are already subscribed to The Ankler for your newsletter. You're on The Ankler podcast with Sean McNulty and Elaine Lowe, who have also been on this show already. And I'll drag you back here whenever you let me. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Marvel Studios' Loki Season 2 is being praised by critics as a masterclass in imaginative storytelling. It is ambitious and spectacularly cinematic. Empire gives Loki Season 2 4 stars. It is back and better than ever. Loki Season 2 for your consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. TV Academy members can watch the series on DisneyStudiosAwards.com. Now let's hear my conversation with Jessica Gunning, who is really the breakout star of the huge breakout Netflix hit, Baby Reindeer. That show has been watched by millions of people around the world, so it's definitely the first time many people have seen Jessica. But she's had a really good sense of humor throughout all this about people who think she's just some kind of overnight success. Jessica's been working in film and TV in the UK for about 15 years and actually has a really great supporting role in this 2014 film Pride. But you can also see why she's struck such a chord as this character of Martha on Baby Reindeer and why so many people like me want to talk to her about it. She's playing this woman who stalks the show's main character, who is played by Richard Gadd, who wrote the show based very closely on his real-life experiences. And kind of inevitably, this has inspired a lot of internet sleuths to try to find out who the real Martha is. And there's a woman who claims she is the inspiration for the character who's been out there giving interviews. But Jessica's been really clear, because she's a trained actor, that what she went into was not playing a real person, but what was on the page. Really working with Richard and the show's director to build this character. So it was just interesting to talk to her about it from that perspective. She's got this great, lively personality and went to so many dark places as this character who is unpredictable and fascinating and not an easy villain, which I think is one of the many things about Baby Reindeer that has made it captivate so many people. She is obviously going a lot of interesting places after this. She's working. She's going back to LA for the first time since she filmed an ill-fated pilot that would have been a remake of What About Bob? I'm dying to see it if anyone wants to pass it along to me. So we had a lot to talk about. It was a great conversation. Listen on for my conversation with the star of Baby Reindeer, Jessica Gunning. So to start talking about Baby Reindeer, I was hoping to go back to the beginning because you had said in an interview that a friend of yours encouraged you to go for it and be brave with playing Martha. And I'm curious about what your friend meant by that and then what you took that advice to mean.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cheesy reply because it's kind of an actor reply, I guess. But I think what he meant was, for this part, when I read the character of Martha, I've had such a strong response to her. I really kind of got her. And in hindsight, actually, I learned that Richard and Veronica, our Block One director, who kind of helped set the tone for the show, they thought that as soon as I was in the audition room. And then, of course, because it has to get the approval from so many people, I ended up auditioning over about 4 months. So I went in about 4 times and really kind of fought for it, which usually I wouldn't do. I would just kind of think, well, what will be, will be. If it's meant to be, then that's right. But for this, I really went for it. And then I think there's a slight nervousness with actors when you get the job. You're a bit like, oh God, I fought for this now and now I've got to actually do it. Yeah. And so there's a sense of that leap of, I suppose, bravery is like fully going for it versus not necessarily phoning it in. I never would do that, but going through the motions and going, okay, I'm hitting everything here. But like almost, not to sound too cheesy, but like giving something of myself to it, properly going for it and allowing the emotion to really be felt. And so that was really good advice because I think there was a slight nervousness when I actually got the part that I could have got, okay, right, I'll just do it and make sure I do a good job and do it right and just, hit all the right marks and everything. I don't mean physically, but literally in the script and everything. But then properly giving something of myself as well is, I think, what that friend meant. And luckily I kind of did. And I felt like I really properly went for it. Yeah.
Is there a way that you can see yourself or that like the audience can see you, kind of the difference between just doing it and hitting the marks and really putting yourself into it? Is there maybe a part of the show that required that more of you than others?
I think any bit where I had to be very, I suppose, moved as Martha, I find it really hard to cry when I'm doing a part. In drama school, they teach you this thing like kind of is like muscle memory. So often, I think it's a Stanislavski technique. You'd maybe touch an item of jewelry, say, and think of something that happened in your past that made you cry. So whenever you touch that thing again, it should activate that memory of emotion. I never have that. I can never really do it. I only like doing it when I'm connecting to the character and what their story is. And so with Martha, I just felt so moved by her all the time, especially that final voicemail that's read. If ever I needed to kind of get into the zone a bit, I'd kind of have a scan of that, like in the courtroom scene, say. But also just kind of tapping into what is actually happening in the show. I think a scene that springs to mind is the scene where he tries to break up with her. There's 2 moments when he takes her back to her house and says, "We're over." It was allowing that properly to sink in and not just trying to cry. It was properly to actually try and imagine that for her, because in her narrative, they were in a relationship in her mind, I suppose. So it was like a breakup.
What's wrong? Tell me.
You, Martha, you're what's wrong.
What can I do to help the reindeer? What do you need?
Space.
Space? From me? From us?
Oh, what are you talking about? There is no us. Fucking hell.
But also when he says about the age gap, that scene at the bar, again, she genuinely is saying, "Oh, I see. Was this all a joke to you? You know, Martha with the big brain." And that genuinely feeling that and not playing it for laughs or anything like that, properly going for it. Those are kind of the things that ping out when I'm thinking about it, yeah.
You're talking about the age gap, and this is something else you'd said when you were auditioning. You know, you're not as old as the character is supposed to be, and that you brought in Nadia Stacey, who's a very successful makeup designer, to help you with the audition, which I just love. I love that that's like a friendship you can draw on. Can you tell me about that?
Oh my God, I know. Well, she's a good friend of mine. She did the makeup design for Pride, a film I was in 10 years ago now, and I was talking to her about it, and I said, you know, the feedback I'm getting is because obviously Richard is playing himself when he's in his 20s, but when we were filming he was in his 30s, so he didn't look like we had the right kind of age gap. And I'm supposed to be in my early 40s and I'm in my late 30s. So I was just chatting to her and said, if you were designing this, what would you do on the day, kind of thing? And she was like, why don't I just do it? Why don't I just help you out and just go and tape you for the audition and just show? And actually, in hindsight, I've really cited Nadia as this, she's now an Oscar-winning makeup designer, but it wasn't a very rushed audition where I shoved a wig on and went in. But Richard remembers that and remembers, thinking, okay, she really is trying to show us that this could work. Sometimes it just needs... because there's so many people that have got to kind of approve it. It just needs one person to think outside the box and go, oh, okay, I can imagine that now in order for it to work out. But yeah, she was the one who had that great idea. And luckily I wore them down in the end.
Does Martha's makeup in the show reflect any, because like her makeup changes so much and it's like part of the script that it can kind of alter. Does any of that reflect the work you did with Nadia?
Well, we had an amazing makeup designer on the show, Fiona Lobo Cranston, and she was brilliant. She mapped out, both of us together actually mapped out her journey. The day I remember especially is the scene where she's feeling a bit gravy, she says, at the bar, and we didn't really have anything on for that day. But I love the progression in the first episode of the montage of her getting ready, and that was a really great day to film because it was just her just showing off really and thinking, what can I show him? What can I look like today for him? Trying to impress.
I love that you guys met on Pride because I can't tell you how many people have watched Baby Reindeer and been like, oh my God, it's the woman from Pride. Like there's so much excitement because that movie I think has grown so much in the past 10 years.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the 10-year anniversary. Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, I think you've talked about it as being kind of one of the things you've been proudest of before this. Like, is there a point of comparison for you of that movie being like pretty big and putting you on a platform and what this experience has been like? Did it prepare you in any way for the Baby Reindeer phenomenon?
Yeah, really. I mean, in a similar way, because I was working with so many people I admired on that film. And there was a day, actually, there was the first few days in, we were all in Wales filming. And I remember they were trying to get a shot of all of us. And they were like, Imelda, move forward. Dominic, Andrew. I was like, what are we doing? How am I in this bunch of people? It's amazing. Bill Nighy. Oh, yeah. Come on, Bill. So, yeah, that was an amazing thing to be part of. But even from the audition process of that was interesting. I got sent just the sides of the film. And I thought it was so intriguing. And when I went into my first audition, they said, the thing about Sian is, she's a real woman.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so real. And they were like, no, she exists. And I was like, oh, right. I was like, so real. But then she does really exist in real life. And then when I read the script, I got the script for my second audition. I read the whole thing in one go, similarly to what I did for Baby Reindeer. And Pride, honestly, made me cry about 5 times during reading that. And then when I was leaving, I saw the writer actually the other day, and he reminded me in my audition, they were auditioning in this tiny little hot casting office. And as I was leaving, I went, congratulations, by the way, I love the script. I laughed my tits off and then the door closed. And he said that on my face, I was just like, why did I say that? And I do remember leaving going, oh man, I hope I've ruined the part. But, they liked it and kept me in. So yeah, it was great. It's such a feel-good film. I want everyone to watch it. I think it's so amazing. And it's based on, true story as well.
Yeah.
And also all the real people, loads of the real people are actually in that final scene. Mm-hmm. When they're marching, they had loads of the real people as part of that as well, which is a really special day.
I feel like it's one of those things that's just grown over the years. Like it was small at the time, but like as over time, more and more people get to see it. So it's getting there. Okay, so
getting there, yeah.
So back to Baby Reindeer, you were talking about Veronica, who was kind of working with Richard to make the show. And then I'm imagining really it was the three of you a lot in building these scenes. And you've talked a little bit about how you worked with her to kind of keep track of Martha's state of mind throughout these scenes. But for what were those conversations with the three of you? What kind of building had to happen as a 3-person effort to make this show work?
Yeah, it's a really delicate dynamic, really, because obviously Richard wrote the script and he's in every scene and he's playing the character of Donnie. But Veronica is so important in finding that right balance. And also she directed the two of us, so it was finding this little kind of triangle where if ever Richard thought anything, he'd mention it to Veronica and then we'd kind of like come up with a solution as a three. But the script was so ripe and ready to kind of go that we didn't really need to necessarily work on that much. But she's such a kind of, it sounds like a delicate director, really, and she's so intuitive. Sometimes in a scene, I would be thinking something, and she'd come over in the break and go, "I think you thought that a bit late." And it'd be blow my mind that she would read that from me. It was amazing. So I love it when you get a relationship with a director that's kind of that in sync with each other. And she saw Martha the same way that I did, and so we ended up having a really great shorthand. And then Josephine, who came on board to direct the second block, similarly so. She's an actress as well, so she was a great director. And again, it's that kind of fine balance. It's such a delicate relationship, and obviously we've got to take care with Richard's story, but they were two brilliantly savvy women to come on board, and I think they transformed it into just such a visually interesting thing as well. Just amazing shots, and the cinematographer Christoph was just brilliant.
Yeah, that's a delicate relationship too to have with a co-star, because you have to build this level of trust with the person you're sharing the screen with. But when it's his story, when he has so much invested in it, you've worked with a lot of other co-stars before. Did that part of it make a difference in what you had to build with Richard and knowing his, that the story belonged to him in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I think it is, there's definitely a sense of responsibility, and I always was checking in to make sure he was feeling okay, because it was so much pressure on him. He's in every scene, but also he had his kind of writer head on quite a lot of the time. But luckily for me, he had done the stage play of both Monkey See, Monkey Do, which was what happened in episode 4. He did that back in 2017, and then he did the stage play of Baby Reindeer. And yeah, it was a delicate balance, but he's also, he is playing a part. So I never felt like I was acting with Richard, which I think was a good thing. I definitely felt like I was acting with the character of Donnie. And in a way, he'd had a kind of dress rehearsal in a sense by doing those shows in Edinburgh, because they were so successful. It was like a kind of dry run, I suppose, for the main event. But of course, obviously, he's having to go through so much. So I was always so mindful, especially the filming of episode 4, which I just think was brilliant. Yeah.
I think you've said that maybe it's especially since the show has come out or making that you feel really fiercely protective of him. And I wonder how that's been with the amount of attention the show has gotten. What does that manifest in? What do you do? How do you show him that level of protection?
I guess I was just honest, I suppose, when I first saw it about how proud I was of him, just because I know him so well now. And I hadn't obviously been around for any of the filming of episode 4. And I really was, when I was kind of blown away at his bravery, really, in telling that episode, but also in his bravery in telling all of it. This is based on his life story, and he was so honest in it. And I think it takes a lot for somebody to do that. He easily could have painted himself as a victim in all of this and taken out anything he regrets or taken out anything that's potentially questionable. And he didn't. He laid it all out there. And I think that is so brave. And so I just kind of try to keep reminding him of what a reach it's had and how many lives it must be affecting. He does some amazing work with a charity called We Are Survivors, and they've received something mad, like a 200% increase in email referrals, and most of them, cite Baby Reindeer as the reason why they got in touch, and I think that's really special. And so I constantly am just chuffed for him. And whenever I see him, we presented actually a BAFTA award together. Which was just a really lovely evening to kind of see. And actually, when we came out, the audience gave us a lovely round of applause, which felt very moving, because it was, the first time we'd been out as a 2, I guess, since the show came out, which felt lovely. Yeah.
Have you tried to go have lunch or something, and you can't be seen in public together because people would get too excited about it?
We did the other day, actually. We did have lunch the other day, and he said it was a little bit like, that officer and a gentleman when we were walking out. Obviously, he wasn't carrying me, but no, it was nice to see him. And people must have thought, what the heck? Do a bit of a double take, yeah.
You guys have both been in a kind of an interesting position that I think artists often avoid, of telling people how to interpret what you made because of all the attention around the real story behind it. I think a lot of times people would say, the audience can take from it what they want, but I think it merits explaining in this, but has that been hard for you to get used to, that you kind of have to like kind of come out and talk to people about what is worth taking away from something, or to remind them of what maybe you wanted them to take away from it? Is that an odd transition?
Yeah, and obviously with, you know, you never want things to be just sound bites or taken out of context, you know, when we were saying in terms of like, we hope that people take from it. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, neither of us expected it to be, I suppose, watched by so many so quickly. So I think that was a bit of a learning curve in terms of the interest around the show and people coming up and wanting to talk about it. But like Richard said, when he released that statement, you know, it's not a documentary. And I think that the point of it isn't that. It isn't to find any of the real identities. It's to kind of take it as a story, which is what it is, you know. So I don't think we expected that much, but it's completely understandable. Obviously, there is such intrigue in this day and age around stories that are based on truth and shows that have done so successfully so quickly. I understand it completely. But yeah, it's a whole new world for me, you know, talking about it. So hopefully we're doing all right.
I mean, was there a point when the show came out where you're like, oh, I can't Google the show title anymore? Like, when did you learn, or how did you learn to kind of protect yourself from it? You know, you're protective of Richard. Like, how did you learn to protect yourself from this level of attention that is more than any person can handle?
Well, luckily I'm not on social media, so I think I am kind of safeguarded against that. You know, that I don't kind of get pings every day and stuff. And my family and friends have been lovely in terms of sharing some nice things with me, but not kind of overloading. So I think that helps, because I don't actually know that it was like, you know, #trending or whatever the cool kids say. But so I haven't needed to protect myself in that sense that much. But it's amazing going out when obviously I live in London. It is amazing the amount of people that do come up and say how much they've enjoyed watching it or give their opinions on things. And that is an immediate, obviously, reaction and response. But the majority of people have just been saying that, you know, they binge watched it in one go, or, you know, they watched it with their granddad, someone said the other day. And so it has had such a mass appeal that I don't think any of us predicted, really.
So you feel like you can get that sense of success without necessarily getting bogged down in a ton of detail that doesn't serve you, I guess.
Yeah, yes, definitely. I'd say, yeah.
Yeah. And you went to LA. I think you said in an interview that it was the first time you'd been to LA since you filmed a pilot that never got made, which I'm so glad to know existed. A What About Bob remake.
I know. It's a shame. It's really fun.
I know. But like, what was that full circle? Like, I don't know if working in LA had ever been like a main goal for you, if you prefer to stay in London, but did that feel like some kind of full circle moment going back?
It did a little bit, yeah, because I'd actually got the part for What About Bob when I auditioned over here, so I didn't have that kind of whole experience of pilot season, which is just a massive thing over there. Yeah. I had a bit of a unique version of it where I think I got the part on the Thursday and I was out by the Sunday to come and do some chemistry reads for the other characters. And they'd put me up in Burbank near the IKEA, so that was what I thought Hollywood was for about 3 weeks. And then somebody was like, no, it's down here. And I was like, oh, okay.
Other side of the mountains, yeah.
Other side of the mountain. It's just so filmic, isn't it? All those studio lots and things. But we're also learning that everyone needs to drive everywhere. I think on like the first week, I'd maybe got a few buses and people were like, no, don't get the bus, you drive. And I was like, okay. But then they were like, get Ubers and cabs and things. But I was like, you need to know where to say to go. And I just didn't know anywhere. So yeah, so it was nice to then go back and have a different experience of LA. But it's a lovely place. And everyone was so great to us. We had some amazing events and, chats with people. It was brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, so now being back home in London, like, do you feel like you're getting a sense of what could be next? I think you've been doing interviews about Baby Reindeer since it came out. So it's all been kind of like living within that. But is the next step sort of starting to emerge?
Yeah, little bits here and there. I think it's going to be a slow burn for me, maybe. I mean, it took 17 years for the part of Martha to come along, so I hope it's not another 17. But I'm in a show with Stephen Merchant that's on Amazon Prime Video and also the BBC over here, and that's coming out tomorrow, actually, over here in the UK.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Perfect timing, yes. So that always feels like you're working again when there's something out there that's on. But yeah, it's really nice. It's given, opportunities for me to meet some really interesting people and hear about projects that are going on. So it's exciting to see what will come next. But yeah, I love a bit of everything, me.
When you walk into those conversations or, maybe future auditions or anything, does Martha come with you? Do people expect something different from you than they might have before Baby Reindeer? Or does it feel like they're expecting something different even if they don't say it?
Yeah, that will be the most interesting thing, I think, about whether it'll be similar things or new things or a completely different twist. Previously to Martha, I think I'd been playing predominantly more comedy roles than otherwise. So I would be really interested to see if any more dramatic roles come through, because I love doing a bit of everything. And that's the beauty of a character like Martha is, in a way, I got to kind of play a whole range of emotions really with her. So yeah, it would be really interesting to see. And I also love doing theatre as well. So that would be an interesting thing as well. Yeah.
Has it felt like doing a bit of everything has been kind of the goal since drama school? I mean, you really have done theater and film and TV and such a range. Like, is that a deliberate goal on your part to spread yourself as many directions as you can?
Yeah, I try to. I've got a great agent who I've been with since I graduated, actually. And we've consciously, I think, tried to choose a little bit of everything just to keep it fresh so that there's no kind of pigeonholing going on. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all, but I never wanted to just do the same thing all the time. So it is nice to do a little bit of everything, theatre, TV, film. And I've been so lucky. I mean, I had to kind of do a timeline of things the other day, just looking back over things that I'd done. And when I was 16, if ever somebody said that firstly I'd still be acting 17 years on, I would be thrilled, but also that I might even forget that I'd done some stuff. I was like, what? That is just crazy to me. Oh yeah, I remember I did that. That's just mad that it's actually a proper job. I feel very lucky.
You told me about your audition process for other things. If you got to a point where you didn't have to audition anymore, which I think, some actors dream of that,
gosh.
or would you?
Imagine that.
But some actors, I think, like auditioning. Like, it keeps you sharp in some way.
I love an audition. Yeah, and also it means
so
that
maybe
you'd
want to keep
chance
doing it.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's scary if you're. I've never been offered something. Let's put that out there. But if I were to be, I'd want to meet the director. I'd want to have a chat about what their vision is. So I think sometimes a meeting is great, and you get to know what the project is. But I actually did get an offer through the other week, which was for a touring production of Peter Pan playing the part of Smee.
That's fun.
So watch out, Hollywood. That was fun.
I just saw a ballet production of Peter Pan. That was
would be lovely.
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, the Smee was a smaller part of that than you think. But anyway, I don't know if that was the direction you were headed in it.
But I love that they'd seen Baby Reindeer and thought, hold on a minute, Smee.
That does it for today's episode. Thank you again to my co-host, Richard Rushfield. This show is edited by Brett Fuchs and co-produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Get the Prestige Junkie newsletter by going to theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you next week.